Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Virtual IoT and Edge Native Day. I have the pleasure now to introduce Thomas Ingleby. Thomas is with Intel and will let us know about the latest developments in developer tools and IDEs at Intel. So up to you, Thomas.
Hello. Yeah, so I'm going to be, as Frederick has said, I'll be walking through some of the developer tooling and IDEs we have on offer right now, and a bit of history and a little bit of the future plans. So first, let's get started. A little bit about me. Right, so I just need to click in the right place. Yeah, so I've been working at Intel for a while on developer tools and products, supporting initially IoT stuff and also system bring up stuff, and also I have been a project lead on MRAA before it came to Eclipse, and also partially UPM. So I'm just going to get first started, and this kind of leading on from the presentation that Tudor gave just beforehand, and we'll cover some stuff about Intel oneAPI, IoT Toolkit, and the environments that we now provide to try and, as we say, meet the developers where they live. So in the past, what we used to have a kind of a monolith, which was the Eclipse CDT product that we bundled up with our tooling and libraries and such. And it was a huge package, and we only provided the one environment with maybe some support for Visual Studio if you were lucky. And then going forward, we've kind of assessed and said, hey, we need to meet all these different environments. We need to make sure that we address the command line users to start with as well. And then also looking at the market data and say, what are the popular environments that people want to use today? So I'm just going to first start off by walking through a bit of what oneAPI has got to go. And this is just a very brief overview. Tudor gave a bit more of an in-depth one. So oneAPI is a effort, both an industry effort and also an Intel product effort, to target a programming model for diverse architectures. So this is so you can target the CPUs, you can also target GPUs and also FPGAs and spatial processors in the future for certain use cases. And this is to adapt one programming model for all of these. And there's one of the largest efforts of this is Data Parallel C++, which is targetable towards the CPU, the GPU, and also FPGAs right now. And it's in a good state. You can go ahead and try it out today if you want to try on some hardware that you might not have. This is one of the things of the Intel Dev Cloud, which if you Google for, you'll find plenty of information on, and that you'll be able to log into that system and use oneAPI against an FPGA, for example. One of the things we also do with oneAPI is we have these toolkits. Now, the base toolkit includes the compiler and stuff, but we also have the IoT toolkit on top of that. And that provides some functionality that we've previously distributed with Intel System Studio. And then we also distribute as part of IoT toolkit. So this is like the Intel compiler and the performance libraries and the analyzers, such as vTune and Inspector. What we've also got is as I was saying earlier, we've pulled apart some of the stuff that we used to have in our old product, Intel System Studio, and we've split it up into more canonical plugins. So for instance, Tudor showed you the UPM sensor browser. Before, the previous version we had was so interlinked with our model and our workflow that you couldn't possibly use it in a plain CDT project. That's now been updated, and now it's a lot more adaptable. Also, as part of the toolkit, we also have some Eclipse plugins for interacting with the Yocto build process, specifically around kernel building, but also other projects utilizing Yocto in the bit-baked build system. Okay. So the first part I'm just going to kind of quickly walk through is one of the tools that we've come out with recently, and this is part of oneAPI, is a command line interface for fetching our samples. Now, this interface we've had something similar for it on inside Eclipse for a long time, for years. And now this is, we wanted to say, okay, these are really nice. We've structured these samples that were being aggregated from different places across the company, and then presenting them to our end users in one location. So we said, okay, cool, let's try to do this on the command line as well. So we've come up with this kind of text-based, like TUI, ncurses interface for the command line, which works on Windows and Linux. So I'm just going to quickly pull it up and show you a quick demo of that. Okay, it should be, yeah, looks good. So I've just logged into a system here on my desk at home. So I've already got Intel IoT toolkit, well, elements of it entirely installed. And I'll just quickly pull up the CLI. So what it's done is we now have a kind of menu interface for browsing the samples as part of the oneAPI toolkits. So we can go down, we can get kind of quick overview what's inside. It'll tell you if there's some tools not included in your current installation, and it gives you instructions on how you might want to remedy that. So I'm just going to quickly, as this is focused primarily on IoT stuff. So as we go through, you can see there's a whole load of stuff around FPGAs, around different libraries that are part of the toolkits. So I'm just going to go down and find something as part of the IoT connections tools. And these are samples, in essence, for the Eclipse MRAA library. As you can see in the description on the right, it very clearly calls out Eclipse MRAA. And if I didn't have MRAA installed on the machine, it would actually tell us, hey, you need to go and fetch MRAA. So if I quickly just tab through these, and what it's done is it's fetched it out of the repository we have on GitHub of the samples, and it's just put it in the path that I selected. I just hit enter a few times, so now it's in my home directory. I'm just going to quickly go in here, and I won't go over too much information on what this sample is, but it's a very basic sample of using MRAA. It's one of the most basic ones, and it has some instructions in here of how you would be able to build it, and it's very, very straightforward. That sort of thing. So you'd be able to do this, and it means you don't need to necessarily go find the repository. Our getting started guide explicitly calls out this tool, and it says, hey, you want to run something on your GPU? Hey, here's a good sample for that. Now this is an IoT one. Unfortunately, today I don't have a system with me that would actually run this correctly, because I haven't got any LEDs attached to this NUC on my desk. It's okay. Okay, the next part. So as part of that, I'm just going to quickly go over how, this is kind of, we now have ways of obtaining the tools. We don't have the, the monolith installation as in the past, where you had to go to the Intel website and you downloaded a executable installer, which would then install stuff in a very out of band way. We've now committed to releasing regularly our software via container images, for instance, on Docker Hub. And we've also now got things packaged in Debian or RPM formats for the for those Linux distributions that support those. And if you go through the Intel things and you go through obtaining the software, it's an option right there alongside. You have 3 ways of installing the software nowadays. You have the installer, the containers, and the package managers. And I'll just quickly show you documentation that we have, an overview, and in essence, it gives you the instructions for how you would add the Intel oneAPI repository to your environment, and also it tells you what's inside the that repository. So if you wanted to install the IoT toolkit, you would install Intel-IoT kit, and then that is installed onto your system, and you'd be then able to pick up the instructions from the branching path of the other installers back onto it. And then also, I'll just briefly mention the containers, which are available in a few flavors. For instance, if you want to be based off Ubuntu, that's available. If you want to be based off CentOS, that's also available. Okay. And this is all in an effort to make our stuff as easy as possible to get obtained, because we have done studies in the past where the amount of steps you needed to get to, for instance, the performance libraries available from Intel, was you would have to be really committed to get that performance increase from your code. And now this is intended where you'd be able to broadly use it as if you were using any other library on your, available in your distribution, without having to, go give us your email address and all the other information you typically have when you visit a company's website. So I'm just now going to transition over to kind of the IDEs that we now support. So I'll start off with the Eclipse for C and C++ developers, which is bundled as part of the IoT toolkit. So the first part you get from this is you'd first get the sample browser, which I haven't screenshotted here, but in essence, if you've had the opportunity to use System Studio in the past, it's UI for viewing the samples, very much the same as the CLI I've showed you. And that's inside the Eclipse thing. And this is actually the original interface to it. And that's available in the Eclipse. What is also then, so if you're now an IoT developer and you wanted to use Eclipse UPM, the sensor browser, which I've got a very low-res screenshot on the bottom there, is you'll be able to search through the sensors and find them, and it'll give you information of how you can add the correct headers and the linking information you would need to add to your project config to use that library or sensor from UPM. And there's also integrations with the Intel oneAPI analyzer tools, such as Inspector and such. Okay, there's always been tools from Intel to support Visual Studio, as it's a very, if you're a Windows developer, it's a very popular environment. Now we also, as the oneAPI toolkit has good packaging, a good solid proposition on Windows especially for people who want to develop against their, CPU or GPU in the future. We have also got a couple of extensions for Visual Studio, which enable very similar things to the Eclipse a bit, although not in so much targeting Linux as Eclipse does. But there's always an opportunity in the future to look at if we decide to. And this is mostly, we have the sample browser and we have also the analyzer integration. What's relatively recently is we're a bit late to the bandwagon, is looking at more modern IDEs such as Visual Studio Code. So in the last few months, we published our first extensions for supporting this. And again, it's very similar functionality because we, in essence, trying to spread out the same ideas from one IDE to all the other ones to try and, meet as many people, as many developers as we can. So the first extensions we did, again, we roll out the sample browser again, so that you can now pull samples of the large collection that we have, growing collection of samples we have, and you can just create that directly inside Visual Studio Code. And you can even do that today without visiting and downloading the oneAPI toolkits. If you're, for instance, using MRAA and you already have MRAA on your system, you can go use this sample browser now to find MRAA samples. If you just go to the marketplace, it will step you through setting that up if you look for oneAPI in the sample browser. And now this is also a good point to mention, what about other IDEs, for instance, especially in the context of this is an Eclipse event, let's talk also about Eclipse There. and stuff like this, and how they are. There's, sometimes it's propositioned as an open source, fully open source alternative to Visual Studio Code. Now, it's always been, at least my goal, that the extensions we produce for this environment also would work on Theia. Now, do they work today? No. We haven't validated yet, but also we have to kind of think of how we would want to position that, as Theia isn't as widely deployed, and also then how would we distribute it? And there's work going on in the cloud tools working group of Eclipse, which we're keeping an eye on. So, and then there's also kind of an expands in that kind of cloud thing as you then go, okay, you have Theia, then now let's talk about Che. I've also attempted to integrate this a little bit with Che, so you again, it's as a gateway to our stuff as we say, okay, let's get the sample browser there again. And now the same code kind of does load. We need to come up with using, the compatible APIs with Theia and Visual Studio Code. But that is then an opportunity for the future. And we're also looking at any opportunity. So we keep an eye on any data we can get our hands on. So for instance, we look at like the Stack Overflow survey. We'll be taking a look at once the Eclipse IoT developer survey results are out, we'll be ingesting those into our decision making of where do we need to target next and what do we need to do in the next few months to make life easier for our developers. Okay. So that's all I have really to talk about in general. If you want to learn more, you can visit the oneAPI site, which the link has been throughout the slide deck, and you can also visit software.intel/oneAPI. And if you would like to reach out to me directly, feel free. My email was at the start of the thing. With any comments, feel free.
Yes, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or use the Ask a Question feature. While people maybe are doing that, so you talked a bit about Eclipse Theia, Eclipse Che, so the various work that we do to build cloud development tools. What's your, you're a tool builder. You've been a tool builder for a while now. What's your take on this? How do you see desktop IDEs versus cloud development tools evolving in the next few years?
It all depends, because it's, one of the things you learn when you're doing kind of developer tooling is that everyone has their own opinion on it. Everyone has their own, everyone has their own Vim config they like. Everyone has their own Notepad++ environment they like. And trying to find how do you enable these developers when everyone has their own environment is very challenging. So you've always got to look at it and go, okay, where to target first. Now, with what we've done so far, we've kind of said, okay, we're targeting kind of people who have these compute devices on their machine, like large CPUs or a GPU or an FPGA. And now some of those classes of devices suit themselves very well to the cloud, because you don't necessarily want this expensive hardware in every developer's environment. So this is where stuff like where Eclipse Che has a very interesting kind of proposition, as both you're able to bring the environment precisely for the user to them through stuff like they have the dev file implementation, so you can bring the whole workbench kind of definition along with the project. And then you can also then use the kind of orchestration of the Kubernetes stuff from the cloud native kind of environment to then say, okay, this needs this kind of resource. And and it's, to say how the future of desktop IDEs, I think there's always going to be the future for it. I mean, everyone's got their own favorite. I don't think that's avoidable. Now, whether, there's desktop environments then migrate into the cloud in a very seamless way, like what Microsoft is doing a bit with their code spaces, I think is what they're calling it now. It does, you go like, well, if there's a use, and if people have got the connectivity to do that, or if they're able to because of, secrecy or elements, you've always got to consider that local is always still going to have to be an option for some people.
Yeah, and what fascinates me about the market of developer tools right now is that you see an emergence of lots more CLI tools. I mean, lots of our projects at Eclipse have their own CLI thingy. You work with Google Cloud or Amazon or whatever, you've got lots of CLI goodness there. And now with oneAPI CLI, I mean, you've got something that's obviously really, really powerful as well. But at the same time, we see the emergence and lots of attention given to command line and character mode. And at the same time, we see the emergence of graphical low-code or no-code development tools in the browser as well. So where can we expect some kind of tools that would go in that direction in the IoT realm for Intel going forward?
We've always got to look at what, for instance, like the community at Eclipse is working on.
Mm-hmm.
As we target, we have a huge range of customers, absolutely huge, and whilst we can work on a tool for one, what we've identified as, hey, this will work, is it might suit us for some strategic customers we've been talking to a lot. There's often the open source stuff that springs up, which gets adopted really fast. So it's what you've always how I see it is you've got to make sure that any features are enabled. So like specifically any kind of like silicon features that we come out with in like a new product, we have to make sure that that is available in as many environments as possible. So where this resurgence of CLIs have come in is you're able to, if you can produce the CLI in a way that's then interactable with other IDEs, then you don't necessarily need to enable that IDE. Is you produce the CLI and go, hey, you interact with it like this, and then the community can then enable it in their environment if they found a value to it.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And at the same time, I mean, one of the things I regret a bit in an historical fashion is that Intel had a great product line, especially with the Edison board. I liked them a lot, and yeah, you withdrew from that market. So hopefully at some point you get back in and have some exciting stuff. I mean, the neural compute sticks are certainly interesting, but that's not a complete platform on its own. So
yeah, there's lots of things we could do and things we don't do any longer. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And as a company, you have to focus at the same time. It's certainly don't have a choice. Margins and all. All right. So there are no questions from the audience, and I think I don't have any further questions for the time being. So one thing I would say in conclusion is, thank you so much, Thomas, for what you do in the MRAA and UPM projects, for what you do in our community. We are glad to have Intel in both our IoT and Edge Native working groups as an active participant, and really appreciate your contributions. And going forward, I will invite people once again to participate before the next session to our 2020 developer survey. It's really important for us to understand the market well, so that people like Tom will be able to build great tools in the open source world to fulfill the needs of developers. So please participate to the survey, and let us know what you can do, what we can do better as well for this kind of virtual event or for the survey itself. So thanks again, Tom, and we'll see you around in a working group meeting somewhere.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
A pleasure. Bye now.